How do I bring a moving camera into Unreal Engine for virtual production? I'm going to show you how. Okay, so how am I lying? Well, I'm lying because everyone always Googles green screen, how to do green screen, and then I realized that nobody's Googling how to do blue screen. And so I pretended that I shot it on green screen, but really I didn't. I shot it on blue screen. You cheeky monkey. All right, so now I've got you in here. I'm going to show you how I do this. So it's not a massive move. I've used I'll probably put an insert, but I've used it's called a second shooter, and it's a little robotic camera. It makes it sound really very Terminator, but it's just a little camera on a slider that's got a little motor in it that lets you do a little move. And since I'm just on my own, I use that to shoot me in my little studio. Ooh. So what I'm going to show you is how I do an extraction. You can skip all of this if you don't care. No worries. I've got timestamps somewhere in the description. But this time I'll actually show you like me do a key inside of Resolve, inside of Fusion. And then I'm going to show you the camera tracker inside of Fusion and how I get that to work. And then I do a little bit different than some other tutorials in the way that I orient the camera and then export that as an FBX. And then I bring that into Unreal Engine, and then I kind of scale it up and stuff like that. It's a little bit like, not that professional. I don't quite know what I'm doing, but I managed to get it to work, and I'll just share with you what I've got, and then hopefully at some point I'll go, oh, this is the cool proper way to do it, and efficiency and everything like that. But I kind of wing it, and that's how I do everything. But in the end, it's what it looks like on screen that counts. So let's get to that part. All right, so I'm going to go into Fusion now and play with this clip. So this clip is a shot with a Blackmagic on the little slider thing, and then as you can see that I don't have any tracking markers, which is great because when I first started this whole thing I was putting tracking markers all over my blue screen, green screen, right? And then if I turn that on I can still pretend it's a green screen. So I would have all these tracking markers, and then when the actor went in front of the trackers I'd have to paint those out, and it was a real pain. And then I spoke to someone who's basically a layout artist, and they said if you want to save yourself a lot of hassle, shoot wider than you need to shoot. And so if you basically I've shot a highest resolution that I can get, which is like 4K on the Blackmagic, and so it's like 4.6K, and then I've shot it with a wider lens that I intend because I want to only kind of like use this area. So I've got all this extra data outside my green screen, and basically the tracking software can look at all this stuff and work out what the camera move is. So then I don't have to worry about putting loads of tracking markers here. So that's a tip. One thing is you might get into problems if you're doing like a close-up blue screen or something like that. So in that case, might have to put some trackers in the background or shoot at even higher resolution. But yeah, we'll come to that later. But a lot of this stuff is you use different techniques for the different types of shots that you're going to do. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all. It's like, well, how can I get away with this? How can I do that? And it's always find that most efficient way of doing stuff. And in this case, if I'm doing a handheld shot or in this case with the slider and stuff like that, this is the approach that I would take. And so now I'm going to show you how I would pull a key. And so I'm going to go into Fusion. Okay, so we're in Fusion, and here is my green screen. Oh, it's blue. Okay, and then I'm going to show you, this is an overview of what I did to create an extraction right here at the end. This is my end result, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of what I do, and this changes week by week as I kind of get more familiar with the software. But basically I've got my background going along here, and then this is for my extraction, and I put a noise reduction on here first, and that just basically gets rid of some of the noise in it, but also it's kind of quite destructive on the foreground. But I'm only using this for the matte, so I basically do all my tricks to make my key, and then I put that matte underneath my foreground at the end. But we'll get to that. So here's my noise reduction, then I put it into my keyer, and then I've got here some garbage mats that I'm using just basically as garbage mats to get rid of all the stuff that I don't need. So then I've got my lovely key, and then I take my original color and then I put some hue correction on it, and it's not the best in the world. I probably need to get rid of a bit more of that, but I basically hue correct as much as I can. And then I use my clean plate, which expands this edge out. And so that's basically my foreground color. And then I use my Kia as the background, or as the matte, and I join those together here. So I've got like the best of both worlds. So you've got all your lovely clean key, and then you've got your kind of expanded edged foreground clip. And then that's all as a pre-multiplied image. And then when you go into Unreal, you use that divide trick to pre-multiply it. So effectively it's giving you, this is the foreground, and then that as the alpha. And then you've got your magic. So let's just start with creating a basic key. And again, you can just skip forward to the next part, which is the camera tracker, if you're kind of familiar with pulling keys and things like that, or you use After Effects or Nuke or whatever it is that you want to use to make your lovely extractions. So in the meantime, for those of you who want to play with Fusion, here's my input clip. And now I'm going to add with Control Space, and I've got a second monitor, so it always pops up over there, and I'm going to add a noise reduction. Add that in. Press go on here. Let's have a look. There you are, just pulling around the threshold. And I don't really care what it's doing to this foreground, but it's really what it's doing to that, all the folds and the noise and the grain and that kind of stuff. So let's just pretend that's good. All right. And I think this might be part of the paid version of DaVinci, but again, it's, if you can afford it, it's definitely, I mean, it's so worth it. Okay, I'm just going to add Alt and middle mouse, just left mouse button, just to add a little noodle dot, because I want to sort of separate these two out. If we zoom over here, you can kind of see what I'm doing. All right, so there's my noise reduction, and now I'm going to do a key on this. So Control Space Bar. I'm going to do keyer, and then often what I'll do is I'll just try different keyers and see which one gives me the best result. So there's never like, I'll always use this one or recommend that one over the other. So I just try different keyers and then find, you know, the best one. But in this case, it was the D keyer, and D stands for Dean. It doesn't. All right. Okay. So I've got my keyer, pressing number 2 to make that one. If anybody actually, I don't know how you do this. So if anybody knows, please let me know in the comments. In Nuke, I'm so used to pressing like, press 1 to go to viewer 1, and then press 2 to go to viewer 2. And so you kind of select them like this, but I don't know how you do it to kind of like go an A-B between this node and say this node, without having to kind of go and click on one and then move my mouse to the other one. So if anybody knows how to do that, please let me know, because it's bugging me, and I don't know how to do that. So yeah, thanks. All right, so there's my keyer. Press this one up here, and then you see what your alpha is. And so this one, you just click here, and then you draw. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. You basically draw what you want to get rid of. And, oops, go like that. Let's go like that. And then you add a bit more extraction with this thing. So you kind of go, oh, a bit more of that one, a bit more of that, and pull that around there. And then you kind of go, that's a good start. And then I'll go in and then just start playing with the adjustments and then see which one gives me the best result. And then let's go to soft, let's play with that one. So a lot of this then for me, it is just like going backwards and forwards and just pressing sliders and kind of finding the sweet spot for, like, you know, motion blur. It's always good, again, to find a frame where you've got some motion blur, so you get like that kind of soft, you know, you can see what it looks like with a soft edge, because it's, you know, it's easier to get a key when everything's solid edge, when you're basically not moving much, and it's kind of much more forgiving. But when things kind of move, and then you'll get like a lot of this sort of stuff trapped in here and things like that. So yeah, try and find a frame where you've got that kind of motion blur going. And then I'm going to just play around this. So this is the key adjustments, changing the chroma softness and the chroma tolerance. Let's see what these do again. It's just kind of like, I think it's just changing the overall blue kind of green selection. Okay, I'm going to go to the matte finesse. And I'm just going to pull up my black clipping. So this should, let's go, was it the white one? It's going to give a bit more density to certain areas. I want to get a bit more thickness on there. Often what I'll do as well with keying is I'll work on one particular area and say, I'll get this bit working well, but it's kind of killing this part. Then I'll do another keyer and then just make a patch for one area. And oh, that's kind of working. I'll make a patch for this area and that bit will work. And so you kind of like use the best kind of key for certain parts of the shot. Okay, so here I'm going to add a garbage matte and I'm just going to add a polygon. I'm unselecting the keyer, otherwise it kind of adds it on top as a merge. Weird. Okay, so drag that noodle into there. And then I'm going to just click on the polygon and then draw a garbage matte around here. And then as you see here, as I move the last point closer to the beginning point, then it will become a little circle, which means it'll close that. So now that's basically the area I want to keep. And so you go into your keyer, and then you go into the settings here, and then you multiply by the mask, and then that gets rid of it. And then one thing I like to do as well, just turn that off, is if I go back into my polygon, and then you see at the top here, if you press this one that looks like a D, that gives you this extra edge. So if you click on one of those points, I think you hold down Alt. No, it's not Alt, it's Control. I'm on a PC, so if you drag Control, and you can do multiple or one at a time, it gives you a soft matte, or it lets you adjust the softness. I'm going to pull him in. But you have to be careful sometimes, because if I click here on the spline, it'll add an extra point. So that's just something to watch out for, because sometimes you're like trying to click these points and then you've got loads of extra points and you're like, what the heck? So that's something to look out for. And then Control, drag, Control, drag, Control, drag. There. Then I'll come back in and adjust this. And while I'm on this frame, you see down here, you've got these little red dots, and it says right click here for shape animation. So you basically click set key and a set key here. And so now if I move my timeline, then I can grab these points. I just dragged over them all like that, and then it'll save a key for those. And so you basically go to your start frame, and then you do that like that. I have to make that a little bit tighter. And then I'm just going to go back into the key and turn on that multiply by mask, so you can see what your result looks like. So now we've got that part going. Next, I'm going to basically deal with the color that's trapped in these edges. See, one option that I would have if I wasn't using the noise reduction is that I could use the despill that's in here, and that will basically look at this overall extraction color, and it will despill that color, which is great. But because I'm using the noise reduction and I don't use this as my foreground, I run a separate color curves under here. So I will basically add a hue curves, and I grab the little white bit on the end of that noodle and drag it into there as my input. Press 2. So here's my green screen. And then I'm going to just pull down, oh, actually I'm going to do Control Z. I'm going to turn that one off and go into the blue. So this is the blue suppression here. And then I pull down my blue, and you can kind of see the blues getting suppressed overall. It's going a bit greeny. I basically want to try and make it this color or this kind of color. So we're kind of a neutral color. So I'm going to pull out some of that blue that's in those edges there. And then it kind of suppresses that. I've got a bit more purple going on here. So if I can pull out a bit more there without kind of pulling too much of the blue out of the face. Okay, so that will give me a little bit of the suppression there. And you can also, if you have to, the trouble is if you turn on 2 of these at the same time, when you move a point, it'll kind of move multiple points. So it's always best to just turn one off, and then you can hit the saturation, pull down a little bit of that from the kind of blue areas. Again, pulling it out of the magenta. And so that kind of helps with this edge here. Now with the color suppression, I'm going to now expand this edge a little bit, and I'll show you why. I'm going to just set up a very basic comp over the background. So I'm just going to add a background, and then I'm going to make that a certain color, make it the kind of color of the environment that I'm going to put it into. So something that's contrasting to that green. And then I'm going to just merge it over the top. So I'll just put this key here. That's going to be my alpha, isn't it? So there's my foreground. I can put that over my background with that as my alpha. And then I can kind of see like my ugliness all in one go. So this is kind of, if I ran it right now, this is what it would look like. So it's like I need to kind of go into here now, go into my polygon, adjust the edge a little bit. So I sped that a little bit up, and that was just me playing with the finessing the key a little bit more. One thing that I did do is go into the matte finesse and then go to number 2 and put on the post filter. That kind of like gave quite a lot of improvement there. So that's nice. I think that's doing like I'm thinking it might be doing like some sort of optical flow type edge estimation. Not quite sure. So if anyone knows, let me know. But again, just like wiggle things and see what looks good. But that seems quite nice. So I like that one. So post filter, whatever that is. So now I'm going to add a clean plate. So I'm just moving that out of the way and pressing Control Space Bar, clean plate. And then background is my color. So that's my background. It goes into the yellow one. And then the key goes into this little white one here. So you click on that little white one there. And then I add a blur node in between these two. So that I had just grab a blur, holding down Shift, and then as you drag it over that noodle, it'll plug it in. So then you go to press 2 to get your clean plate, and then you invert this. So double click on the clean plate, go to, I think it's mask, garbage mask, invert. There we are. Okay, so now they are now look like an alien. So if you want to make an alien movie, perfect. There we are. So now you can click on the clean plate, go back to plate, and then we want to grow these edges. So you can kind of basically see what it's doing is it's taking whatever this color, these pixels are at the end here, and then it grows them out like that. So if you change the blur and reduce that blur to a tiny amount, it basically will give you a better edge. Okay, so you add your clean plate, and then you change the size of your blur, and then you grow your edges. So this will extend out those edges, and I think if you change your blur, it kind of eats in where it kind of like erodes from. But you don't use all of it, you just use a touch of it. So if I'm now going to go back to my reference, and I'm going to change the input to the clean plate from the hue curves, and you see now it's kind of expanding those edges. Let's find a frame with some motion blur on it. You blend that out. You can kind of see that you're getting a bit better edges along here. All right, so I'm mixing in just a bit of that just to help with some of it. You go too extreme, it breaks it, but just a touch certainly helps. Okay, so now I'm going to export these as EXRs. So one thing I did find is that Unreal, if it sometimes when you bring in the EXR sequence, it'll look at the data window rather than the actual size of the frame. So your images will kind of come in and then they'll start like moving around, like when you're playing them back in the viewer, And it's like, what's going on? Because if you look at them on the disc, they look fine. You've got like your actor inside your blue screen kind of area, inside your frame, and it all looks good. But the data window is basically outside of your extraction where there's like zeros. Sometimes it'll just clip those off and it'll be the actual data window, and it'll use that as the center of the frame. It's kind of weird, but the trick basically is to put it over a background that's transparent. So that's what I'm adding here. So I basically add another background, and that defaults to the size of your project. And this one I'm using UHD, even though it was shot a little bit higher res, but it's fine for now. So I'm going to change this background, the color to black, but I'm going to make the alpha 0, so it's transparent. So if I just look at this right now, it's black, and I look at the alpha, it's a solid alpha, so we want to make that invisible like that. So then you basically take your clean plate, your extraction, put that over your background like that, and then for the alpha you plug in your result of your keyer. So now there's your pre-multiplied image over a transparent alpha, and so we can run that out as a sequence of EXRs. So you need to add a saver, Control spacebar, saver, and then go to Browse, and then navigate to where you want to put it. In this case, I'm putting it in here, and then you've got the name of the base name, and then .exr, and it puts the frame number between those dots like that. And then I'm going to go to my format, and I use DWA, which is super light, and then leave everything else the same. And I'm just going to call it float 16, so it's 16-bit float rather than 32-bit float. Again, it's just smaller, and this is perfectly great amount of data that I can use inside of Unreal Engine. And then originally this was all shot with the Blackmagic, and it was shot with the ProRes in the film color space. So it's got that wide gamut. And so if you look at this, these EXRs on disk, they are scene referred, which means that they'll look kind of flat and they need to be tone mapped. Which is what your monitor is doing. It's kind of like taking all that huge wide gamut data and it's kind of like putting it into like a color space, the Rec 709 color space, so it looks nice here. But the actual raw files, and that's what you get with the EXRs, you get kind of like a raw color space that needs to be processed. But we'll do that inside of Unreal, and I use that MF_color chroma key thing to do the color correction, which is probably not the most technical way of doing it, but it kind of looks nice. So that's what you're getting. All right, so we're going to render out those frames, and then with those frames, I'm going to then show you how to track the camera inside of DaVinci. So let's just go and kick that off and run those out. So I go to Fusion, and then render all savers. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, those frames are rendered, and I'm going to bring those in with Control spacebar and then a loader, and then add that. And that basically, I've got my frames in a single directory, and they've got the base name, file name, .exr, and I'm going to click on the first one, and then press 2 just to view those. So here's my plate, and what I've got going here is, like I said, I've got no markers, but it's going to look at everything else in the room. So all this stuff outside of this area, it's going to look at all these points and kind of figure out the camera track, which is great. But since I'm in here, I can either remove it. I think in the camera tracker, you can kind of create like a garbage mat and stuff like that. But the way I do it is that I basically use that clean plate to kind of remove me and then make a bigger blue screen. So it won't look at that. And if it does find anything, you can just delete those later. But this is just an easier way of doing that for me. And the way I do it is I add a color curves node, which was, I think it's just that one. We can do it whatever way you feel comfortable. But basically, I'll show you. If I'm going to grab that one there, oops, get off. I'm going to grab one of those. So color curves, put my background into that. And then I'm going to put my extraction as the key, or no, whatever it is, as the alpha, like that. And then I'm going to say multiply by mask, and then invert that. There we go. So basically it's cutting me out of this. And then I'm going to use the clean plate trick I did before to kind of fill that area in. So Control Space, clean plate. Use that as my background. And then add a blur node. And then put that into this little white one here. Press 2. Okay. Then I go into my mask and I invert that. And then I go and blur this, I think. Okay, yeah. And then I go into my clean plate. And then I go grow edges. Whoa, look at that. So that will basically, that removes me. And then what I've got here is I blur it as well. So I'm going to add another blur after this. Use that as the input, as the matte. And then I'm just going to blur it. Oh, wrong way around. So go into settings and then apply mask inverted. So that blurs me out. So now I've got a kind of clean plate. And that just makes it easier to camera track. So there's my shot. And there should be enough. Like I said before, I shoot wider, so there's information outside of the blue screen area, and that's what it will use to track. And then also if you shoot with a spherical lens that's kind of rectilinear, which means that it's not all bowing, then it's much easier for the camera track to work. And also then you don't have to kind of do the lens distortions and all those sort of things to correct it. Because really what you should do is apply, do a lens grid, and then you have to kind of like warp it out so that everything is like rectilinear, and that's kind of the professional way of doing it. But for mine, I'm like, this is, honestly, it's good enough. But if I was getting paid to do this, then that's what I would do and make it like real nice. All right, here we go. So there's my, basically that's going to be my input. And now next I'm going to add a camera tracker. Control Space, camera tracker. Camera tracker, that one there. And then hit add. Now, direction threshold and minimum feature separation. So basically the smaller you make those, the more points that it looks at in the image, and then it'll kind of use more points to kind of calculate the track. So I think I'm just going to go to my start frame, put those low, and then what else do I do? That's pretty much it. I think I can go into camera. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it. That's it. And then I press this one, which is bi-directional tracking, so it will go forwards and then backwards, so it gives you a better track. And then I press auto track, and then that's it. I'm done. Isn't that great? And it's like, a computer can do the rest. And it does. It's great. I love it. So I let that cook away. And it's pretty quick, but the more points you have, then the longer it'll take. But you can kind of see here that it's like, it's finding bits of the light, and it's finding bits of this, and they're staying pretty consistent. So that saves me having to put loads of tracking markers over my green screen. I know it's blue. I'm just saying green, because if everyone Googles how to do green screen. So anyway, again, I like blue. Also, depends what the person's wearing. If my characters are all wearing blue, then I do green screen. But I've got a lot of kind of military kind of characters in my film, so they'll be wearing kind of military olive green kind of colours and things like that. So that's why another reason why I'm doing the green screen. But mostly it's because of that. I hate that kind of greeny tinge that it adds to people's faces. All right, so there's my. It's done. It's finished that part. So now I go into the camera, and I'm going to change the focal length. And I shot this with an 11mm camera lens. I can't remember which one it was. And then it kind of detected that it's using the Blackmagic because of the metadata in the actual original file, which is quite sweet, I think. And then I go to solve, and then I hit solve, and then again I sit back and go, great, it's done something. Okay, and you can see all these little dots. Those little dots are basically 3D trackers in space, and there's one here that's kind of like finding something there. But if I press play now, then it looks like that's working, which is great. Again, this isn't like, it's kind of a very simple camera move in this case. It's not like it's a handheld and it's going too fast. So this is kind of like a kind of an easy thing. We should be able to solve this one. This is like a demo version, isn't it? Normally that's the sort of thing you get on the demos. They're always like really smooth and slow and that, rather than like real shots where the camera's going crazy and you're like, oh, nothing's going to tracking. Okay, so there we go. So pretty happy with that. Everything looks pretty consistent. The only thing I'd probably get rid of is that point there. So I'm just going to select that point, hit delete, and there might be some more that come up. But no, that's pretty good. There's nothing else that's offensive there. And now I'm going to go to export. So I just hit export, and then it's done it. Look, it's made me a camera tracker, merged, all this sort of thing. But it's kind of put it somewhere else in my shot. Where did it put it? I don't know why I put it there. That's probably because I got a little bit of a messy scene. Okay, so it has made a mini little 3D scene. First thing I've got here is my camera, and then I've got a merge 3D, and then a renderer, and the point cloud, and the ground plane. Just going to go to the end here, and then you can kind of see like there's a tiny little purple line here, and that's actually my ground plane. So what I'm going to do is just plug in my original background into here. And so this is my 3D camera, and I've got my merge 3D, and that's kind of like my little 3D scene. So to go into that scene, you grab it, but then you kind of throw it into this background window. So you go up into my viewer, and now I've kind of switched into 3D mode. I'm using my middle mouse to kind of go up and down. I'm holding the Alt key so I can orbit around. So there is my little camera doing my camera move like this, and there's my 3D scene. And then this is the ground plane. So you can kind of see where my floor is. My floor is like about here. So I want to move my floor up. And what I can do, and then there's different ways of doing this. I think some people go into the camera mode and you go into the transform, and then you kind of pick some spots and it gives you where the ground is. And I don't know, it's all a bit complicated for me. But what I do is that I go into my merge 3D, like that. And I go into my camera and I basically add a transform. So I'm going to go Control, Spacebar, and transform 3D. So you add a transform 3D here after the camera. So I'm going to transform the camera. So I click on that node, and then I go into my controls, and I can move my camera up or down. But I also want to move the point cloud in exactly the same amount too. So you have to duplicate that. So I copy it. So you go right mouse button, copy, and then you have to click on the background so none of these nodes are selected, and then you hit paste instance. So now it's got an instance of that node, and then I hit shift and then drag it over the point cloud. So now when I move this transform, that transform is connected to this one, so it's a clone of that, and that'll move the point cloud by the same amount. So if I select my transform and then I move my Y, you can kind of see my ground plane is moving down, but it's not really. My camera's moving up. So you kind of move it down. And to see this a bit clearer, if I go into my ground plane, and then I change the opacity and bring that down, bring that up, but I bring the alpha down. So there we go. So you can kind of see it a bit clearer. And then if I move this around, you can kind of see that that's pretty much tracking on the floor now. And I'm also going to go into the point cloud, and I'm going to make that renderable. See this little button here? Click on that one, and then you see all these points as well. So now I'm viewing the camera tracker by pressing 2 to view that one, and it's rendering these points and the floor in here at the same time. So you can press play, and you can kind of see all these like 3D points are all tracking to the lights, and these aren't trackers, these are actually 3D points. So if I go into this merge 3D, select it and throw it into here, and then move middle mouse and orbit around. So those are actually, these points are rendering, and so they're not tracking, they're not moving or anything, they're in 3D space. So that's a good thing. So there's our floor, and then you can kind of see here pretty much where our floor should be, and it's pretty much where these are in 3D space, like the lowest points of the tracker. So what I can do is go back into this transform node, and I can just nudge this up a little bit like that. So that's pretty much where my floor should be. And that's where my light was. That's where my other closer light was. And then go back into here and then press play. And then you can see that that floor is pretty much sticking to where it should be, which is great. So now we've got a 3D camera track. And the nice thing is when you export this FBX, it bakes all of these transforms into the final FBX. So you don't have to do it inside the camera tracker where some people do this thing where you pick certain points and it's just, I don't like the control. And this way is much easier and you've got a lot more control here to get it exactly where you want it, which is great. So that's fantastic. So now we've got our camera track and I'm loving it. And now we're going to bring this into Unreal Engine. But before we do, we have to export it from DaVinci. And so you hit the control space bar and then you type FBX exporter. There it is, like that, and hit add. Then we navigate to where we want to put it, and then you give it a name. .fbx. I think it defaults to 3ds, so FBX. Hit save, and then I like to turn off reduce constant keys because I like to have all my keys there. Frame rate is 24 frames per second. Binary is default, blah, 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 default. And then the important thing is plug it into the Merge 3D node rather than the actual camera tracker because that's a 2D world and that's the 3D world. So it needs to go from the end of this noodle into the exporter like that. Double click on that. That's all good. That all looks fine. I'm not going to scale the units. We're going to mess around inside of Unreal to do that. And then we're ready to go. I've turned off all the other savers. So the only thing that's active as a saver is this guy here. So you hit in Fusion, Render All Savers, and then you let that chug away, export out, and it's saving a key for every single frame of your FBX camera. And then we'll bring that into Unreal Engine and have a play. Okay, so we're in a brand new project of Unreal Engine. I'm currently on 5.53, and I don't think there's anything new or special in this one compared to the others, so this should all be the same. I'm just going to quickly set up the material and all those things for the blue screen, the EXR sequence, all that sort of stuff. So if you're kind of familiar with how I did that in the other video, you can kind of skip forward a little bit. But for those of you who aren't, or just like a refresher, I'm going to do it, but I'll do it quickly. So I'm just going to make a new directory, into content, and then new folder. I'm going to call this media. And let's just go with an image media source. So media, image media source, IMS. I'm going to call it BS move. Then I'm going to double click on that. And then I'm going to navigate to that EXR sequence. And then click open. And there it is. These are in the DaVinci film color space, so they look pretty flat, but we're going to add an MF chroma key material node so that you can open up an instance and then you can apply a color correction to it. So I'm just going to leave that open, but move it onto my other screen, or actually I could just put it up here in the background like that, because if that's playing, then you'll see it in the media texture. So next thing I'm going to do is add a media player. So right mouse button, media player, and then it wants to add a media texture asset. So you say yes. So MP for media player, and I'm going to call this BS movie. All right, and then there's my media texture. So I'm going to rename that one media texture BS move. There we go. So we've got those two, and then we go to double click on the media player, and then here is the one, which is this guy up here. That's my image media source. So here it is up here, and then I just plug that into it. What you can do though is you can have like several different image media sources or file media sources, and then just switch it for the media player. So what that means is if I was doing a real-time game, I might use the image media source to kind of set up the movement and to make sure all my stuff's working, but then switch it for like an MP4, which is much smaller and faster and lighter, but not very good for cinematics, but great for real-time in-engine game type stuff. So anyway, so I'm going to double click on that, and then this is going to put this into that media player. Hit save. Right, save. In fact, I'm going to hit save on that one too. All right. Okay. All right. I closed it, but it doesn't matter. It should be fine. All right. So now I've got my media texture, and you can see that image media source through the media player puts it on the texture. And now that texture I'm going to put into a material. So right mouse button, material, just making a very basic material, MM for master material, BS move. Okay. Double click on that one. And then drag this media texture into here. And then I'm going to, I normally have it as the unlit, but this time I'm going to, no, I'll leave it, I'll put it as unlit, and that just makes it easier. All right, put my RGB into my emissive, and then my alpha into my, wait for it. First I've got to change the blend mode from opaque to, and I like, again, to use the masked material. So that one uses the opacity mask, and put the alpha into the opacity mask. And if I go to the square one, we'll see the awful things that does. And it gives me the on-off, basically, opacity mask gives you either a solid pixel or an invisible pixel. And what that means is that your edges will be just binary, on or off. So you can see here, it's on or off, on or off. So it's really ugly. But what you do is you go to the opacity mask and you drag out an dithered temporal AA. And what that does is it kind of like newsprintifies it, in that it'll take, for areas that are more opaque, it'll have lots of dots and less holes. And in areas that are a lot less opaque, you'll have a lot less dots. And then that allows you to kind of have a dithered, a kind of a soft blend for your masked materials. And masked materials are much better in some respects, in that they work with depth of field. So when you have things that are out of focus, shallow depth of field, so you've got things out of focus in the foreground and things out of focus in the background, your media plate will be able to work properly. But if you're using a regular transparency thing, things in front kind of break the transparency, because Unreal's not very good with transparency. And no game engine is. They always, it's just a speed thing. It's the way that they kind of work internally. But that's a way of getting around it. And then you have to change your temporal samples to be higher when you come to render, and then that fixes it looking so pixelated. Okay, so the other thing to do is to add a divide node. And the divide, so you basically drag this out, hit divide, and this unpre-multiplies your image by the alpha. And if I plug this into my emissive, we'll see that dark edge disappear here. So basically that takes whatever color value you've got, and then it multiplies it, or actually divides it by the alpha channel, but it kind of makes it more opaque in that same color. So basically it's what compositing software does internally, but we have to kind of trick it here. Or if you're not using masked material, you could use the alpha composite pre-multiplied alpha rather than translucent, and that kind of does the same thing. Okay, so now the other thing I need to add is my color correction that goes after here and before the emissive, and you drag a node from there and you hit MF underscore chroma keyer. And I'm not chroma keying here, but this node has got a color corrector in it when you create an instance of the material. So we're going to do that next. So hit apply. That's all good to go. Close that down. I'm going to go and right mouse click on my master material and create material instance, MI, material instance, BS move. Okay, and that will be my main material that I'm going to be using. But if I double click on that now, first thing is go to visualization, click on color correction amount and turn that to full. Otherwise, anything you do with the color corrector, key F5, you won't see it because it's not mixing any of it in. So in here, you've got lift, gamma, gain, brightness, contrast, saturation, hue, shift. And so I tend to just, let me try it with the gamma. So click on the gamma, go down here, and there we go. Look at that, beautiful. And it's probably not correct from the point of view of like, I don't know what the math is that goes from tone mapping the Blackmagic film color space to Rec 709 or sRGB. I think we're in linear sRGB internally inside of this flavor of Unreal Engine. But I don't know what the crazy math is. It's probably something to do with an OCIO color space node and those sort of things. So if you do let me know, if you do know what that answer is, please let me know in the comments because I'd like to know because I'd like to know how to do this properly rather than just winging it. But for now, I'm just winging it. So I'm just going to hit OK, and then we can go in here and adjust the color and brightness and things like that. But I'll do that once kind of further on in the scene. So now I've got all the basic building blocks, and now I'm going to add a card. So I'm going to go to shape, add a plane, wherever he is. I don't know where he is in 3D space. Oh, he's quite low up there. There he is. Okay. All right. And then I'm just going to drag my material onto that plane. And then rotate him around. So it should be 90. And let's just set it at 0, 0, 0. Okay. Oops. And then I'm also going to change my scale because this is 16:9 aspect ratio, so I can never remember the UHD resolution, but I make it 1.92, so 1920 by 1080 NY, 1.08. So it's that aspect ratio. So 1.92 by 1.08. Turn on my lock and then I can kind of scale this down. But I won't worry about this yet because we're going to be playing with all this scale and stuff once I bring in the camera. Okay, so now we've got our material, we've got our blue screen on that material, and now I'm going to create a sequencer and then I'm going to bring in that camera into the sequencer. Ooh, all right. So right mouse button, cinematics, level sequence, LS, I'm going to call this BS move. Okay, now double click on that. Okay, there we go. So how do I now bring in, so if you've just joined me because you've skipped, great. So we're at the point now where we're bringing in that camera match move, FBX from DaVinci, and we've got a empty level sequence and I've got my material character just on a card. That's all set up. And it's defaulted to 30 frames per second, but our camera's at 24. So I'm just going to change that to 24 so there's no messing around. And now I'm going to bring in that FBX camera that we made earlier. And I go to the little spanner, click on that one, and then hit import. And then I go to where I saved it, and I press open. And then I turn off, I think reduce keys comes on by default, so I turn that one off, and everything else I'm just going to leave it. At some point I'll work out how to get the right scale, but for now I do it in a different way. I add an actor and I parent that to the camera, or the camera to the actor, and then I scale that. So we'll show you how I do that now. But I'm just going to hit import, and then it brings in the camera with the move on it, and there's our camera move, all done. But if I come out of this, you'll see that it's kind of very small, and yeah, I don't quite know what the scale setting is and all that sort of stuff. But there's my move, and what I do is I add an actor, basic. So I go into whatever this thing is called, quickly add to project. What is that button called? Box plus button, and then basic actor. And I add an actor and I set that at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And I make the camera a child of that. Okay. And then I get my plane and I make that a child of the camera. But I have to turn on movable for that plane as well. So that's my plane, and it's the correct aspect ratio for my plate, and then I parent that to the actual camera itself. So now as I move this camera around, you'll see that little plate is stuck to it and is moving. So that's great. So now I'm going to come back into here, and now we need to push him back in 3D space. So let's go and let's reset him to 0, 0, 0, that plane. That should be 0, 0, 0. That should be, let's go and reset this to 90, 90, 0, 90. And then I'm going to push him in this direction here, like that. There we are. So there he is. Close up of, yeah. All right. So, but we're going to move all this in a second. Okay, so he's not doing anything because we need to bring in that animation, the media player. So let's go and add that. So I'm going to add a media player, media track, and then I'm going to go to my first frame, and then I'm going to add a media source, which is the IMS, which is great. And then I'm going to go right mouse button on media source, go to properties. There's my media source, and then I choose my media texture, and that's going to that move, which is the one on there, and then that's it. And I let go, and now there's my move. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my plane, bring him closer to camera, scale him. Okay, so what I'm doing here is that I've got my plane, and I'm basically finding the spot relative to the center of that camera where the camera moves and the plane feels like it's in the right 3D place. And so it's a trade-off between scaling that image and bringing it closer or further away to the camera. And there's probably a very clever way of doing this, and I don't know how, and I'm winging it. But I do it through basically changing the scale of the plate, the actual media plate, and the distance it is from the camera. And at some point you kind of find that spot where it feels like those feet are locked, and you can kind of like zoom in and out a little bit with your field of view, and he feels like he's kind of locked. But now if I looked at this in 3D space, he's probably really tiny wherever he is. I can't even see him. Where is he? Where is my man? There he is there, look. So look, you can tell he's kind of tiny. So what I'm going to do is just bring in a reference scale, and I'm going to just add that. Oh, there he is. So there's my camera. Look at the size of my camera. So my camera's massive. My guy is tiny. But what I can do is scale my overall actor, and that scales my man, and it'll scale my camera. And so we're going to find out what the correct scale is by bringing in the mannequin. So to add the mannequin, you just go to the content browser, I think, and then add feature or content pack. And then I'm just going to add in the third person one, and you just hit add to project, and it just quickly loads it in and adds it down here. And I think if you go into characters now, mannequin, there's my mannequin, and then meshes, there it is. So there's my min, there it is. And as you can see, I was a little bit off in my scale. However, what I can do now is just go to that actor, which is a parent of the camera, and the plane is a child of the camera. So you grab that and you scale it up, and it's around about 30 or something. So you just keep scaling this up. Yeah, so this one, it's around about 22 is about the right sort of scale for my own. Oh, no, a bit more. Let's have a look. Maybe it's more like that. Okay, so 25. So I don't know how that math works, but if I now go back into my sequencer and look through that camera, he'll still be locked to the ground, but we'll have a mannequin in there. So it feels kind of right. Click on that one like that. And so now what I can do is just reposition my actor a little bit to kind of find where the best place is. I'm going to move him down a little bit like that. Just feel where he feels good. So if I move him too far down, yeah, he's sort of sliding. Let's leave him back up there. Let's go back up there. And then let's bring him, I can bring the whole thing forward. It feels like I'm moving him, but I'm not. I'm moving the world a little bit. So let's have a look. It's going to move him down like that. And what I'm going to do as well, because I want him to be, I want his feet to be on the ground here. And then don't worry, with him intersecting, I'm going to fix that in a minute. But now I want to, I'm going to go back into my camera plane, into my plane, and just bring him forward or backwards. I can't remember now, one way or the other. So you'll feel more locked. I think I've pushed him a little bit further back. Let's have a look, and at some point he will feel like he's more locked to that plate. Let's zoom in a bit. I wish there was a way in Unreal that you could do a little 2D push in on the camera, on the viewport, like you can in 3D Studio Max and Blender and things like that, but I've not found a way of doing that yet, so hopefully they'll come up with that. He feels like he's in the right spot. You see a little bit of jitter and jumping. That's because he's trying to bring this stuff in real time. But when you actually come to render it, like if I press stop, you can see the quality's improved a lot. Okay. So let's go and move that guy. I'm just going to move my light as well. I'm just going to hit Control L and hold that. I'm just going to move my light around like that, just because that's bugging me. All right, let's go move this character over here as well now. Oh no, not you. Him. So we don't want to move my actor. If we do want to move the actor, we move the actor and the camera because he's relative to the camera. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Click over there. Okay, so it looks like his foot is locked to the ground, and we've got our move on there. But, you know, the elephant in the room is that his feet are underground. So what I'm going to do is I can move him up. So that's one way of fixing it. But then he's not quite right in the right space. So what I'm going to do is I've got a way of putting the feet back on top. And that basically disables the Z depth, or Z depth, that's what I'd say. Okay, so what we're going to do is go and make a duplicate texture just for this feet area. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So I'm going to grab my master material, right mouse button, duplicate it, and this is going to be called master material BS move feet. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this guy. So this is my plane. I'm just going to give him a name. So this is my main. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just duplicate this, edit, duplicate, and I'm going to call this one BS move feet. So I'm just going to parent him onto that one there. Okay, and then reset, reset, reset. So I've got my main, and then I've made this little child, and he's basically, I reset his transformations. So we've got the main, and then I've got a copy of that as a child of the main one. So this is just for the feet. So I'm going to turn off my main one. I'm just going to turn on my feet one. And then I'm going to put that master material BS move feet into that slot. And we'll add the same material instance in a minute. But now I'm going to go into that material. And I'm going to show you, if we go into, if you look in here and then you hit depth, there's one that's like a Z depth, disable depth test. So if you click on that, it'll get rid of this, but you can't click on it if it's a masked material. So this only works with translucent materials. So I can change this to the alpha composite translucent material, and I have to feed my alpha into the opacity rather than the opacity mask. And then I can, actually, I'll leave it as translucent. There we go. Because I could turn off the alpha composite because then you don't need the divide, but I'll just leave it as translucent for now. And then you can see that the divide's working, all those things. So that's great. And now I go and change the depth, disable depth test, and then the feet will appear in front of this. And there we are. So now those feet, if I go into the sequence and just hit play, so now they'll feel like they're in the right spot. And you can see there's a little bit of sliding, so I'll kind of play with the height and the scale and that sort of stuff to kind of get it to work. And then the other thing I need to do is copy and make a material instance of this one too. So you have to go create material instance, and then I'm going to call this MIBS move feet. Put that on here, and I need to copy the same settings that I have on this guy. So I've not figured out a way of copying those. I suppose I could make some sort of like master thing. Anyway, in the end, I'm just going to go into my gamma and I'm going to copy that number, or I think I can save that number, but I'm just going to copy that value there. Copy, hit OK, and then go into this one. Gamma, click in there, paste that in there, hit OK, and then I've got to turn on that one there, and then also I think that was it. I think that was those two, wasn't it? Okay. All right, so there's those two, and then you could do, if you wanted to, if you haven't got like depth of field and things like that, you could use just a regular translucent material, but I want to have like things in front of this and behind it and things like that, so I want to have that the mask material. One of the big problems with using this setup is that it kind of will break having things in front of it. I can't put things in front of this guy, so what I do is I just make a little area just for the feet intersection. But before I do, I'm just going to kind of change my scale of this guy and move him up and down and that kind of stuff, just to find the sweet spot where he's not sliding. So that's a good position for that. So that's good. But now also the other thing is, with this material, the masked shadows sort of disappear as well. So I'm going to use the main guy, and then I've got this guy on top of him. Oh, I've got a difference in the brightness. So let's go and see what else I adjusted. Oh, I think I adjusted the brightness as well, didn't I, on this guy? So let me just go back into this material instance and then paste that into this one. Should be the same. Okay, so now my feet are working, but I just want to put a little mat for this area. Okay, so now let's go back into my material. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little texture coordinate and a little mat to punch out the rest of the image. I don't want to keep the feet area. So I've made a really simple little texture, which I'm going to bring in now. Here we go, square. Okay, here we go. Okay. So I've made a really simple texture, and all it is a gradated soft. All right, it's just a box with a bit of a blur on it. So it's basically just, there's probably some way of doing this inside of Unreal, so you don't have to use a texture, but it's just, for me, it's easier. So I just made a texture, and what I could do is just make a texture like this, sort of like as a mask. Basically, I'm just making a little mask, and you could do it in Fusion and export that out and bring that in. But I'm going to do this so that I can move it for other shots, or depending on where I need it on the floor. But it's very straightforward. But it's not, if you've not done it before, and that's the thing with all this stuff, a lot of it is quite straightforward, but it's hard to learn all this stuff. It's not that clear, especially this kind of virtual production-y budget level stuff, because it really isn't, again, it's not really designed to do this sort of thing, so we're kind of hacking it, but the rewards are just really fun, and I really love it. I think it's awesome. So anyway, so let's just say no to that. But there's my texture. So I'm going to go into just the feet material, and then I'm going to multiply. I'm just dragging that image in there. I'm going to multiply this image by this image, and that will give me, just adding a multiply node, multiply. All right, sorry, big fan of that film. And then drag that into the opacity here. And I can get rid of this div one. I don't need that one because this one's using the translucent material. Okay, and then I hit apply, like that. And then you can see now, let me just turn this one off and have that one on. So you can see this image here is like fading off, solid here, and it's fading off there. So I want to move this little bit just so it's around his feet. And I'm going to do that by adding a coordinate, texture coordinate. So you go to the UVs and then you drag a thing off there and you say texture coordinate, actually if I just type coordinate, texture coordinate. Okay, so this now it exposes your U and V offsets. So what we want to do is we want to offset the V, and I do that by adding an append node to it. So append to vector, append vector. Let's just kill that one. So I'm going to hit 1 to add a vector, one vector, a number basically. I'm going to hit 1 again to add another number. So this is going to be A and B, but I'm going to use it as my X and my Y offset. And then I'm going to add this to this node. So I hit, that one is an add. Okay, so add this value to this texture coordinate. Okay, so I'm just going to hit apply, and you'll see nothing right now. But if I change this value now to 0.5, it should move it 50% up. So let's say 0.5, and then hit apply. There you go. So it's pushed that up there. And so you could sort of go in here, you can go minus 0.2 like that, and then hit enter and then hit apply. And you kind of go, oh, there it is like that. Or what you can do is you can make these, what's it called? Parameters. So you convert these to a parameter. And what that does is it exposes it then to the material instance. So you can then do it in real time with the material instance. So we're just going to call this offset Y, or is it UV? I don't know, Y. I'm calling it Y. Okay, offset Y, and then this one, right mouse button, convert to parameter, offset X, and that will basically push it that way or that way. We don't really need it, but I've got it in there anyway. And what we can also do is add a scale as well, and so you can add a multiply and that. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like this. So we've got those, and I'm now going to save this. And now if we go back into the material instance, it's all back and forth, isn't it? If we go into the material instance of this one, and then look at the top here, global scalar parameter values. Now we've got that X and Y and they've been exposed. So you can now go into here, and if I move this around, look, you can actually do it in real time. So you can kind of work out where you want this sort of thing. Oh, and it's kind of repeating. So to turn that off, by default, it repeats textures. Unreal does. So I'm going to just hit save, come out of this one, go back into that feet master material, and then we go into the texture sample. I think you press this button down here to give us more information. And it says sampler source, and we change that from texture asset to, you've got wrap, which I think is the default. So if an image, as you move it away, it basically repeats itself. So if you scale that image down, you'll have like loads of like a tile. Basically the default was to tile the image, but we want to clamp it. So what this will do is that if I move the image away, it doesn't try and repeat anything. It's basically it's clamped, hence the name. Okay, so I hit apply now, and then you'll see this part disappear. So we'll come back into here. I'm just going to file save all, and then we go into this instance, and then that's because I just hit file save, didn't we? Okay, here we go. It does that. If you hit file save, it kind of like it refreshes it. Okay, so now I go into here and I can move this around and put it down there. That's great. And then I'm going to unhide my main person. And so now I've got, should be working in 3D space. So he's working in 3D space, but his feet are covered. And then I'm going to look through the camera itself. So now we've got best of both worlds. So we've got our feet kind of being in the right 3D space, and we've got me being occluded by people and things in the scene, and we're all good to go to the next part. So now we've got like this. Now the next part is to like dress the scene, put things in there, and kind of go to town. Okay, so I brought that scene into an existing scene, which was the retro spaceship asset that I got off Fab, and I kind of like placed my card, and I kind of just moved him around the scene so that it kind of felt right, and the angle felt right, and the rotation, so you can kind of like position it around. But what I did do was I put some lights in here. Let me Control Z these. I basically put some lights in here to mirror where the lights are on my plate. So I had like a practical light here, and I had a practical side light, and this one was slightly warm as well because I was doing this for something else. And then so I kind of you match your lighting in the environment to the lighting on the plate, rather than trying to manipulate how the colors and the light looks on the image that you shot. So again, back to that. I think it's called switch light, where you use that kind of normals and kind of clever AI stuff to relight your plate, which is brilliant. But I prefer to be less destructive on the actual colors on the day, because you've got all control over the lighting because we're shooting blue screen. So it's best to get all of as much as you can done on the day. And then you basically take your environment and you kind of match it. So here I put another light so that it's kind of casting this same sort of bluey kind of even light on that side, and that was it. Now, one thing that I have got, so I've got some things, I've sort of put them in front of me so you can kind of see that I'm getting occluded there by the this sort of platformy thing. But at the beginning, I am kind of in front of this desk. Now, it's only the feet part that I added, but it's like as I come through here, you can see, if I don't have it on, you can see my feet are getting clipped off. Now, the way to solve that is, because I had that texture coordinate, I'm going to expose that to the sequencer so we can adjust where that position is. So I'm basically like animating a mat to fix that where it's kind of poking through. So I'm going to do that now and not talk for about 8 seconds. It's almost impossible for me. Okay, so to do that, we select that image, or that object, which was the move feet, like that one. And then I drag that into the sequencer. And now in the sequencer, to expose that material parameter, you have to press plus, static mesh component, and then plus again. And then you go to the material parameter here, slot 1 Lambert. It'll be in there. That will list any of the parameters that you've created in the material. So I should have the ones that I made, which was the offset X, offset Y. These other ones, I think these were the ones that were all part of that MF underscore chroma key one, but this was the one I made. So offset X, press that. And now if I open this up, now there's that value, and it's exposed to the sequencer, so I can save a key for that. So if I press that button there, then I have saved a key, and I can move it around like that. So I'm just going to put it there. Now I'm going to move my timeline forward, and then here you can sort of see, I'm just sort of seeing that little bit of the foot come through. So I'm going to move it back, well, just a touch. All right, it's going to be difficult, this one, because it's a little bit soft. So really what I need to do is make a sharper texture, but for demonstrative purposes, I'm just going to do it badly for now. And I'll come back and fix it. And then you'll go, wow, that's amazing. You fixed it. Okay. Wait. And then I can go into the actual, what's it called? The curves for this. And then really kind of fine tune where that is. Okay. So for now, that's as much as I'm going to do. What I could do is go into that parameter and then add a rotation to it as well, so that I could rotate that where that matte is. But for now, I would probably just, when it comes to that point, I might just paint that one little frame in Resolve. But you get the idea. The other thing that I did in here was I added added a little shadow from him onto this chair, and that was just by duplicating this main plate. So if I just delete this guy for a second. So here's my main plate, and then I've got my feet, and I've got me. So there's my feet, and there's me, and then this one's using that masked material. So with that, I get shadows. The kind of shadows, again, are quite soft in this one, but if I just duplicate him, so right mouse button, edit, duplicate. So I've got 2 of those, and I can move this one around independently now. And as I push him about, we should at some point see somewhere where he's shadowing. And then what I'm going to do is hide him but have him cast shadows by going into the visibility. So you make him, so you look for visible, rendering visible, turn that off, but then look for hidden shadow. That was it. Then you turn on hidden shadow, and then he'll cast the shadow. So if I move this around at some point, we'll see. Oh, there we are. You can see on the chair there, you're getting like a shadow. So if as I move this, you can sort of see there that it's like faking a shadow onto that chair. And so you just put those around wherever you want to occlude things, and they're using that same video material that this is using. And because it's got the mask translucency with the dithered temporal thing, then you can kind of fake your shadows. So there we go. So the next thing now is that this camera that came in is like a standard camera, so it's not the Cine camera. So what I do is I basically create a Cine camera and attach it to this camera and look through that Cine camera. And the advantage of that is you can pan off and you can rotate and change the camera view a little bit too. So I'm just going to go to my first frame, and then I'm going to go under here, those 3 little dots, and then say create camera here, and it's going to be Cine camera actor. And there it is in my level. This is my sub level. And then I drag that and just make it a child of my main camera. And then I make sure my rotations and everything are zeroed out, which they should be by default. Yep, great. So they're all 0, 0, 0. And now I'm going to look through that camera rather than this camera. So I'm going to go into camera 3D up here. This is the camera track, the camera cuts track. If you right mouse button on that, you can choose what other cameras are available in your scene. So this is called Cine Camera Actor 1, and now it's switched to that one. And there wasn't a big difference. Everything looks the same, except this one has now got depth of field, which is great because that's what we like. And then I think it's added it into the sequencer. Yeah. So if you choose it there, it'll pull it from here and put it into the sequencer. So now this camera isn't active for rendering. It's still there as basically as our transformations, but the actual camera lens and everything and all of the camera parameters are all controlled on the one that we just made. So I can change my aperture, and you can kind of like a deeper focus, that sort of thing. Don't get too crazy. And I'm going to change my focus distance. Put it on you. And I've got one of my favorite. I've added a favorite here, but the draw debug focus plane. So I just have that one in my favorites all the time because I use that a lot. So now I can kind of get those lined up. Turn that off. And so now this will be my render camera. And here we can see, the depth of field, and that's the reason why I did that thing with the feet and use the mask transparency, because I want to use depth of field on this sort of stuff. So if you're not using depth of field and that, you can probably just go for the regular transparency or translucency materials. But I like to have more cinematic kind of filmic kind of look going. So now it's time to render this out. So I'm going to render this and bring that into DaVinci and give it a look and make it look beautiful, and it'll be the thing that we see that we sawed at the beginning of the video. And if you want to watch how I did that, then you can watch the other video where I kind of go over my whole blue screen to Unreal process. And yeah, thanks for watching, and please subscribe, because that really, really helps me grow, and it helps me keep making videos, and it encourages me to do more. So thank you very much for watching.